In the Marvel Comics, Zerus is the third son of Dracula, with an insatiable hunger for power and the throne. He made his first appearance in the Death of Dracula comic. Although he was not as strong as his father, he was still able to accomplish what his father never could. He united all the sects of vampires and brought them under one umbrella to form a new world order. In today's video, we will discuss about this ruthless and cunning son of Dracula. But before we get started with the video, we have a small request for you. If you like our content, subscribe to us and like this video. It might be just a small click for you, but it means a lot to us. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's get started. The Dark Tale of Xarus, son of Dracula. Xarus is the third son of Dracula. He made his first appearance during the Death of Dracula storyline. In this first introduction, he proves his mettle by killing off the king of vampires. Yes, Xarus kills his own father during the Death of Dracula storyline. The story starts when all the vampires from different sects assemble for a gathering. The vampires have different sects between them. The most powerful among them are the Krieger sect and the Claw sect, which are bloodlines of warriors. The second most powerful sect among them is the Mysticos sect, and this is because they have infiltrated the business world of humans and amassed huge wealth. Then we have primal vampire sects like Nosferatu, Charnaputra, Purebloods, and Trikes. Then we have the Anchorite sect, the vampires that stay in hiding and feed upon the blood of sheep and pigs. Last but not least, we have the Atlantean sect, the vampires who lived in water and are also called the Aqueous. Janus, the son of Dracula, is also present there. Zerus, the third son of Dracula, also arrives at the gathering with Alyssa from the Siren sect, the seductress sect of the vampires. All the vampires have gathered to discuss the problem of human encroachment. The humans have been growing in population and have started occupying the lands of vampires too. Zerus then addresses his father and clears that humans have always hated and feared the vampires, and now their growing population is posing a huge roadblock for the growth of vampires, and he wants to change things. After finishing his words, Zerus suddenly stabs Dracula with a wooden stake. But being the king of vampires, Dracula fights back and calls Zerus a treacherous dog. Suddenly, all the primal sects also start attacking Dracula with wooden stakes. Dracula fights them but eventually falls down lifeless, and Zerus uses a sword to behead his father. The other sects and Janus are shocked at the turn of events. As the shock leaves, they are all filled with rage against Zerus. Zerus addresses the crowd and tells them that they have lived in hiding like weaklings for centuries. Dracula accepted being a weakling and allowed humans to rule the world, but he will not. He proposes that if all the vampires come together, humanity will stand no chance against their combined power. The warrior sects of Krieger and Claw disapprove of Zerus's actions and leave the site. With the powerhouses gone, Janus thinks that Zerus will not be successful in achieving what he has set out to do. Zerus gives the head of Dracula to the Atlantean sect and asks them to keep an eye on him and ensure that no one ever revives him. Although Janus also didn't like his father, he's still upset that his younger brother killed his father. Alyssa meets him and says that Zerus doesn't have what it takes to be the ruler of the vampires, and that Janus should be the new lord of vampires. This idea almost seduces Janus, but he knows how powerful of a seductress the Siren sect can be, and says he does not want to be a ruler. He leaves the area and reaches his brother's cabin. Janus confronts Zerus about the disapproval of the strongest sects and what he will do without their power. Zerus asks Janus to calm down and explains his plan. Zerus had asked Brad, one of the brilliant engineers from the Mysticos sect, to create a pendant that would reflect the harmful lights of the sun that causes the skins of vampires to burn, and he has been successful. Now, his vampire brethren can go out in the sunlight. They are no longer confined to the darkness. And as for the sects, he intends to make an example out of the Krieger sect. He has already sent his enemy to the Krieger's fort, and they will annihilate their kind. This will establish his power and and strengthen his position as the ruler of vampires. Zerus asks Janus to join him. Janus asks for some time and instead meets the leaders of Mystikos and Anchorite and discusses ways to defeat Zerus. He visits Istanbul to meet the Claw sect and asks them for help to defeat Zerus. Meanwhile, Alyssa has sent some Siren sect assassins to kill Zerus by seducing him. When one of the Siren members is about to attack Zerus, he intercepts the attack and beheads the Siren. He brings her head to Alyssa and sets an example for what will happen to anyone who betrays him. This earns him Alyssa's loyalty. Sunrise is getting closer, and every vampire has been given one pendant to save them from the sun. Right about then, Janus arrives with his allies and opposes Zerus's movement. Janus has also brought the Claw sect with him. Janus orders the Claws to attack Zerus, but instead of attacking Zerus, they hold Janus and his group at sword point. As it turns out, the Claw sect was already on board with Zerus's plan from the beginning. Their disapproval was only a ploy to bring out the traitors and kill them even before his movement started. As the sunrise is a few seconds away, Alyssa comes and gives Janus a goodbye kiss, but she also places something inside Janus's pocket. When the sun rises, the leader of Mystikos and Anchorite meet their demise by burning to ashes. But everyone is shocked as to why nothing is happening to Janus. Janus realizes that Alyssa has saved his life by putting the pendants in his pocket, and he makes a run for it. As the sun rises, every vampire sees the light of day. They rejoice and announce Zerus as the Lord of Vampires. Zerus, the new Lord of Shadows, wants world domination. After becoming the new Lord of Vampires, Zerus brings his army to San Francisco, the new home of the mutants, after the destruction of Xavier Institute. Zerus makes a bulletproof plan to turn the mutants into vampires because they are both alike. They are both shunned and hated by society, so they can rule the world if they join hands. He sets his plan in motion when Jubilee, one of the mutants and a student of Wolverine, makes her way to San Francisco to meet her old friends. When Pixie and Jubilee are in Union Square, a vampire suicide bomber explodes in the area, coating Jubilee completely in vampire blood. Jubilee is taken to the Utopia Island to run some tests on her and discover if she has developed any vampiric tendencies. Around the same time, the X-Men start receiving multiple reports of vampire attacks across San Francisco. Thus, a small team comprising Wolverine, Pixie, Archangel, and Colossus goes out to investigate the vampiric incidents in the city. Here they meet Blade, who explains that Dracula is dead and Zerus, the son of Dracula, is responsible for all of these attacks. Since San Francisco is swarming with vampires, Scott decides to retrieve Dracula's head and bring him to life to defeat Zerus. Blade opposes this idea, but Scott suggests this is the only way to fight Zerus. That night, Jubilee escapes her confinement and rushes to the lair of Zerus because she is being driven by a primal lust which is making her do this. Zerus is delighted to meet Jubilee. He explains that when she was exposed to the vampire's blood, she went into a condition where she was no longer human, but she was also not a complete vampire. Thus, Zerus bites Jubilee on the neck, making her a vampire and relieving her of the pain. Since Jubilee is like family to Wolverine, he sets out to find her no matter what. In Utopia, Namor brings the head of Dracula from the Atlantean vampires, and the X-Men bring Dracula back to life. Meanwhile, Wolverine is killing vampires left and right to find any information on Jubilee. Back at Zerus' lair, he assigns Jubilee to bite Wolverine and turn him into a vampire once he arrives there searching for her. Finally, Wolverine arrives in a bunker to find Jubilee. He saves her, and when Wolverine turns, Jubilee bites Wolverine and claims he'll thank her later. Zerus is worried that Wolverine's healing factor might prevent him from turning into a vampire, so he cages Wolverine just to be safe. But we all know no one can contain this beast. Wolverine breaks out and demands blood. signifying that he has been fully converted into a vampire. Meanwhile, the vampire attacks on San Francisco increase at a significant rate, prompting Cyclops to contact Xarus. Zerus proposes Cyclops to unite as one because humans have hated and loathed both of their species. If they join forces, the humans will stand no chance against them. Scott denies this offer, and Xarus reveals that Wolverine and Jubilee have already been converted into vampires, and they are loving it. Scott still sticks to his ground. Thus, Xarus declares war, and Wolverine warns Cyclops that he's coming for his head. Xarus launches a three-front attack: an aerial attack, an underwater attack, and a frontal attack on Utopia. Scott sends Archangel to handle the aerial attack, and Namor handles the underwater attack. Cyclops calls for only the thick-skinned X-Men, like Colossus and Emma Frost, along with him, to handle the frontal attack. The battle starts while Xarus monitors them on his screen. The mutants are able to overwhelm the vampires easily, but Wolverine arrives on the scene and turns the tide of the battle. As the mutants are about to lose, Scott presses a button and Wolverine stops. Scott reveals that he already predicted that this might happen. Thus, he asked Dr. Nemesis to inject nanobots inside Wolverine that would shut down his healing factor at the DNA level. And this is a switch that turns on Wolverine's healing factor. After Cyclops presses the button, Wolverine's healing factor kickstarts and fights the vampirism in his body. Since the vampirism is gone from his body, Wolverine comes to his senses and starts killing all the vampires on sight. After defeating all the vampires from the three front attacks, Wolverine announces he's coming for Zerus. Zerus asks his subordinates to release another wave of vampires on the mutants, but his subordinates say that gathering another wave of vampires will take weeks. Zerus is agitated and starts threatening his subordinates, but the former king of vampires, Dracula, arrives there. Dracula says he forgives all the other vampires because they were led astray, but he'll kill Xarus himself. Xarus asks his subordinates to help him kill Dracula again, but no one comes to his aid. He says that he'll do it himself and starts attacking Dracula. Right about then, the X-Men arrive in Xarus' lair and start slaughtering the remaining vampire army. Meanwhile, Xarus is able to land a few hits on Dracula, but unsurprisingly, he is beheaded by his father. This ends Xarus' run as the Lord of Vampires, and Dracula becomes the ruler of vampires again. The Undying Return of Xarus as the Shadow Colonel. As we know, any death in the comics is not permanent, and they can be revived later. Xarus, too, is later revived during the Vampire Civil War storyline. He adopts the alias of Shadow Colonel and assembles a team called the Legion of the Unliving. He starts massacring the weaker vampires in order to reach Dracula and dethrone him. A few Romanians get caught in the midst of the vampire war. Thus, the Avengers come to their rescue. The Shadow Colonel surrenders in front of the Avengers, and he is escorted to the Avengers Mountain. While in Avengers Mountain, the Hellbound Sarge takes control of Ghost Rider's body and helps the Shadow Colonel escape. Since the Ghost Rider is also added to the Legion of the Unliving, their power grows exponentially, and they start taking over Madripoor. The Avengers eventually stop them, but Xarus, along with his team, escapes the Avengers and reaches Russia. In Russia, they convert all the prisoners inside Sololitsk Federal Penal Colony No. 9 into vampires. The Avengers, along with Blade, also arrive in Russia to fight the vampire outbreak. Here, Blade kills Xarus by chopping off his head. However, Xarus' head is alive even after he is decapitated. Thus, the Legion of Unliving run away from the site with Xarus' body and meet with Dracula, who is in Chernobyl. Xarus' head is again reattached to his body, and he returns to life. But this time, he helps his father create a new vampire nation in Chernobyl. Xarus Unleashed, Marvel's vampiric powerhouse. Being the son of the ruler of vampires, Xarus has all the powers that an average vampire should have, like superhuman strength, speed, stamina, agility, and reflexes. Apart from this, Xarus also has the ability to turn anyone into a vampire by biting them. Zerus is an immortal and possesses a regenerative ability that is not as strong as Wolverine's, but strong enough to help him recover from multiple bullet wounds and fire burns in an instant. Xarus also possesses the power to hypnotize anyone by looking into their eyes for a short period of time. Apart from that, Xarus also possesses the powers of shape-shifting, sorcery, and weather manipulation. When Xarus adopted the alias of Shadow Colonel, he displayed the ability to shoot laser beams from his eyes. While his laser vision was not particularly strong, it was strong enough to stun powerful opponents like Blade for a brief period. Marvelous verdict. It has been established from the very beginning that Zerus is one of the few characters who thinks 2 steps ahead of his enemy. He showcased his clever and cunning nature when his brother confronted him with the Claw Sect, but as it turned out, the Claw Sect was already with Zerus on his plan. Thus, we would like to see more of this character in the future, but his new alias, Shadow Colonel, seems much weaker than the Prime Zerus. Although the reason behind this is unknown, we just want to see this character in his full glory in the comics because we know for sure that this character is not done. There's also news floating around that the new Blade movie, in the making, features Dracula as the primary antagonist, so it might not be impossible to see Xarus being featured in the movie as the secondary antagonist. The possibility with this character are endless. With that being said, if you like our content, like and subscribe if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone!